Brexit.
Brexit means Brexit, and we're going to make a success of it.
Imagine that it never happens. What if our politicians turn around and tell us that they are revoking Article 50?
I'm angry. I'm angry that we've spent 3 years not properly focusing on the myriad of issues that we know desperately require our attention. Climate change, the NHS, public transport, child poverty, food bank use, social care, universal credit.
Right now it seems unlikely, but let's explore the events that could lead up to us remaining in the EU after all. The 3rd of May 2019. Following a huge defeat by the Conservative Party in the local elections, the party as a whole holds a confidence vote on Theresa May from a grassroots level. She loses the vote, but with no obvious replacement in sight and Britain coming ever closer to European elections that it was never supposed to be holding in the first place, many party members have already fled to the Brexit party.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's good to see so many of you here to listen to the Attorney General.
So the moderate Conservative MPs, those who are happy with a softer Brexit that might involve staying in a customs union and single market, keep her, for now, inside the party.
Do you think there should be a second referendum? What do you think?
I think it's an option for the future, but it's not an option for today, because if we put a referendum tomorrow, what's it going to be on? What's the question going to be?
What would you like the question to be on? Would you like Remain to be on the ballot paper?
I think that the tests against the government have to be put now, and that's what we're doing. The government must go back and renegotiate and see what it comes back with, and Parliament must look at that time. I think to do anything else now would be to ignore the reality of the situation, is that this government has had all this time to negotiate and hasn't really achieved anything.
But Labour also suffer heavy defeats on a local level, losing to the parties offering more clearly the option of a second referendum, such as the Liberal Democrats.
No, we want, after the European elections, to get back to the issue of having a people's vote. That is the only way of resolving the issue, in which there is a question on the ballot paper: do you wish to remain or do you wish to proceed with Brexit?
Over the coming weeks, this would strengthen the position of groups like Momentum and force Labour to either add a second referendum to the deal they're negotiating with the Conservatives, or walk out of the talks. The 23rd of May 2019.
The people of Richmond Park and North Kingston have sent a shockwave through this Conservative Brexit government, and our message is clear. We do not want a hard Brexit. We do not want to be pulled out of the single market, and we will not let intolerance, division and fear win.
Labour lose once again to Remainer parties like the Lib Dems in the European elections. This would force them to cease talking with the Conservatives, who are now further in favour of leaving without a deal, thanks to losses to the Brexit Party and UKIP.
I do believe that we can win these European elections, and that we can again start to put the fear of God into our members of Parliament in Westminster. They deserve nothing less than that after the way they've treated us over this betrayal.
So with Labour and the Conservatives divided, this would force a series of legally binding parliamentary indicative votes on a way forward.
However, if we cannot agree on a single unified approach, then we would instead agree a number of options for the future relationship that we could put to the House in a series of votes to determine which course to pursue. Crucially, the government stands ready to abide by the decision of the House. But to make this process work, the opposition would need to agree to this too.
Over the coming weeks, Parliament would once again fail to make a legally binding decision on a way forward, because ultimately, Parliament does not want to leave the EU, but doesn't want to remain either, nor do they agree a second referendum would be helpful to the situation. So by June, there is only one option, with the Conservatives wanting to oust May, and with Labour not finding a large enough majority for a second referendum. The only option left is to hold a general election, in the hope of finding a majority for something So as promised, Theresa May resigns and the Conservatives find a new leader. They look towards an anti-establishment Leave voter who would be willing to take the UK out of the EU without a deal. Why? Well, to get rid of any encroachment of the Brexit Party and UKIP on the Conservative vote share. So Labour would also have to take a huge risk in losing those Leave voting northern constituencies and fight with an option of a second referendum front and centre to make gains with Remainers. But ultimately, throughout the course of the campaign, it becomes clear those Leave voting northern Labour constituencies and MPs that reside there do not want to lose their seats.
Do you want to see a second referendum?
I have reservations. I would prefer to push the government into a general election for the reasons that I've said. I don't think Theresa May will have got the respect or support of Parliament or her own party or the opposition if she can't get any deal through. And in that situation, she's not a credible government. She can't take things through. She's not stable. We should have a general election.
What are your reservations about then?
In terms of a people's vote, if the government was in power, the current government that we've got, they would hold the pen on that people's vote. They would determine the questions that will be asked in such a people's vote. They might be able to skew it in particular directions to secure the result that they wanted. And I would question the fairness of that. But as I said, I mean, ultimately, if Theresa May can't get a deal through Parliament, should she really be the Prime Minister?
And Remain Conservative MPs don't want to lose their seats either. And so the manifestos get confused. The UK faces plenty of these moments, and trust in the two main political parties falls to an all-time low. Meanwhile, UKIP, the Brexit Party, the Lib Dems, the Greens, the SNP, and Plaid all make gains, while the two main political parties struggle. In Northern Ireland, the DUP are replaced by another Remain-supporting Unionist party, with Sinn Féin taking the nationalist seats. And because of our first past the post system, there is no majority in Parliament. So Labour, who won the most seats, are forced to join a coalition. Now, throughout July, the Lib Dems do not want to be in coalition again. They got burned by it enough last time. Any Irish party would learn from the DUP lesson and stay out of a Brexit coalition government. But the SNP would go into coalition on the basis of more rights for Scotland, possibly a second independence referendum, and holding a referendum on the EU with an option to remain.
Friends, we gather here in Edinburgh, our beautiful capital city. Soon to be, we hope, and how good does this sound? The capital city of an independent Scotland. And determined that we will never allow our nation's place in the world to be sacrificed by the likes of Nigel Farage, Jacob Rees-Mogg or Boris Johnson. Brexit is an unforgivable act of Tory sabotage on our country. Having failed to force her disastrous plan through Parliament, the Prime Minister is now looking for help from Labour. Let me be blunt. I don't trust Theresa May. But on Brexit, I don't trust Jeremy Corbyn either.
So Labour and the SNP go into coalition. But nonetheless, the option of having a second referendum as front and centre of Labour Party policy would split the Labour Party. Momentum and the far left would be on one side, the Blairites and the Labour MPs would be on the other.
So this is another reason why one of my messages to European leaders is understand Brexit's bad for Britain, it's principally bad for Britain, but it's bad for Europe too. It weakens Europe at a time when it needs to be strong.
So you've been going around campaigning for this second referendum and, I mean, I think it's fair to say lobbying other European leaders of its merits.
And if a second referendum on our membership of the EU came to a vote in Parliament, even with the Labour Party government in power, it would still likely split the Labour Party and face a defeat in Parliament. So throughout August and September comes another way of trying to get a second referendum through Parliament in a cross-party alliance. This would be an option in where Labour would try to find a way of running a second referendum which reflects all sides of the House to ensure that it's neither biased towards Leave nor Remain, and the question and answering is fair. But one thing becomes obvious during these new talks. The New Conservatives, UKIP and the Brexit Party do not want an option to remain, but hold a minority in Parliament, while the Remainer parties do, but are divided on which Brexit options to offer. Should it be Theresa May's deal? Should it be no deal? Should it be another Brexit option, such as Norway or Canada? And so, by the end of September, nothing is agreed.
But we've agreed to this already.
No, we haven't, because nothing's agreed until everything is agreed. And therefore we should reiterate that and say quite clearly that if we don't get the trade deal we want, you don't get the money. And that's a very strong negotiating position.
So that leads back to square one, where the Labour Party try to negotiate more legal reassurances so that the UK can and will get full access to the customs union and single market, which the SNP also want, in the next phase of negotiations, so that the UK can leave the EU, but not in a way that's detrimental to the UK economy. And after another series of failed votes on the withdrawal agreement, which failed because ultimately the MPs who want to remain see no benefit in leaving but not having a say, while those who want to leave see no benefit in not leaving fully, and so Parliament is led into stalemate. It gets near to the 31st of October with votes on either an option to extend Article 50 further, which fails to win a majority, leave the EU without a deal, which the incumbent Labour government of the time does not want and also fails to win a majority in Parliament, and revoking Article 50. Now, imagine we had that vote on revoking Article 50 and all of a sudden, Parliament, at the 11th hour, decides to revoke Article 50 and remain in the EU. So Britain votes to remain in the EU after all. As always, join in the debate below and subscribe.